Welcome back to the CONVO Couch, everyone. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Jonny Sue is still spinning on those ones and twos. And today in the studio, well, not in the studio, but on the couch, we have our good friend, foreign policy expert, and the CEO starter of popularresistance.org. We have Kevin Zeese in the house. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on today and talking about this exciting subject. You know, I told you before that we're wasting valuable Kevin Zeese time talking about this impeachment when we could be talking about Nicaragua, the Ukraine, what's going on in South and Central America. So we do appreciate you coming on and going through this whole monotonous situation with us.
Well, there are so many crises in the world and in the United States that this impeachment, and such a disappointing impeachment, there's so little to it. It really is a diversion from so much more important activity going on.
Well, let's get down to the point. What is the main purpose at this point for the Democrats in impeaching Donald Trump? Let me give you 4 scenarios. Is it A, removing him from office, B, hiding their own nefarious acts, C, damaging Trump's chances in the next election, or D, something else I'm missing?
Well, I think the something else you're missing is I think some of those are part of the answer, but I think the other one that you're missing is retaking control of the Senate. The Republicans have more than 20 senators up for re-election, twice as many as Democrats in 2020. There are 6 to 12, depending how you look at it, who are potentially defeatable, especially the half dozen. And I think that putting them in the position of having to defend Trump in this kind of way that the Republicans are doing it by creating this on-trial approach to impeachment could potentially hurt some of those Republicans. Now, it would hurt them more, and it would hurt Donald Trump more if this was occurring in June rather than in January. This is now, 10 months away from the 2020 election, and so by then this will be almost a forgotten memory. So it's going to be hard to use in the election. But I think that's one of the Democrats' mistake, is that they rushed this and did this in January.
Yeah. So why are the Democrats, though, trying to do this during an election year? Because it seems like the timing of this impeachment trial is a little suspect, because we should all be focused on, not just the presidency, but the congressional candidates and the local candidates running. So why take a chance and make the same mistake that the Republicans made with Bill Clinton when they shot up his approval ratings?
That's a really good question. I think the fact that this is happening in the election, it's the only time impeachment's ever occurred. Of course, it's only occurred a few times in our history. But it's the only time that impeachment has occurred in an election year. If the real impeachment, the real removal of Donald Trump would happen if he lost the election.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Many Trump supporters and even non-Trump supporters have doubts about doing this in an election year. It seems to be taking the power away from voters. I know we have very limited power in voting in this mirage democracy, but that really is the issue. I think that kind of could backfire against the Democrats, the fact that this is an election year.
Yeah, so why not just vote him out? What do they have to gain necessarily?
I think the problem for the Democrats is, this is always the problem for the Democrats, is what their voters want and what their funders want are two different things. Their voters are very much in line with the Bernie Sanders positions, but the DNC and their donors, the donor class, the corporations, the wealthy who fund the party, really don't want improved Medicare for all. They want to keep the health insurance system because they profit from it. They really don't want a Green New Deal because they profit from the fossil fuel economy. They don't want a living wage because low wages are good for the donor class. I mean, so all these issues that Sanders is right on, and I'm not a Democrat, so this is not an advertisement for voting for. I gave up on the Democrats in the early part of the Clinton era, so I'm not. I was Ralph Nader's spokesperson in 2004, so I'm not advocating any candidate here, but I'm looking at the Democratic Party. Sanders is with the voters. Biden is with the donors. Who's going to win? Is it the Biden, Buttigieg, Klobuchar with the donors, or is it the Sanders, maybe Warren with the people? That's the real problem with the Democrats. And if they want to defeat Donald Trump, they need to stand with the people.
Yeah.
But to stand with the people, Sanders has got to, or won, but Sanders more clearly has to overcome the DNC, which is working very hard to stop him. Sanders is really the only candidate who can beat Trump, as far as I can tell. He's the only one that can energize the base of the Democratic Party to get them to come out and vote and defeat Trump. Jig or Klobuchar will turn off the base. They'll stay home. And many that would have voted for a Sanders will then.
Oh.
Did we lose him?
Voted for Trump. So I think the Democrats' problem with using the election year approach as opposed to the impeachment year approach.
Yeah. The Democrats seem to be trying to impeach Donald Trump on his motives, where the Republicans are actually defending Donald Trump on actual facts. We have a little clip of Trump's lawyer here speaking simple truths and then making Donald Trump look like the victim. Take a quick look.
Senator Schumer said earlier today that the eyes of the founders are on these proceedings. Indeed, that's true. But it is the heart of the Constitution that governs these proceedings. And what we just heard from Manager Schiff, courts have no role. Manager Schiff also talked about a trifecta. I'll give you a trifecta. During the proceedings that took place before the Judiciary Committee, the president was denied the right to cross-examine witnesses. The president was denied the right to access evidence. And the president was denied the right to have counsel present at hearings. That's a trifecta.
Now, I mean, Kevin, he's speaking simple truths over here. A lot of people feel that the whole process in the House was a bunch of malarkey, as Joe Biden would say. Is this helping or hurting the president at this point?
Well, that is the real question. Is this helping or hurting the president at this point? I mean, you could see in the polls that really Trump's approval, disapproval rating has not changed much. If anything, it's gone more positive since this impeachment process began. You can see in the polls whether people's views on should Trump be removed by impeachment, almost a 50-50 split. Some polls say yes, some polls say no. And so the polls indicate this is solidifying Trump's base and energizing his base. You can see the Republican Party in the Senate is totally solid. They've turned down 12 efforts yesterday by Senator Schumer and others to try to get witnesses, documents, a dozen different amendments to the proposal by Mitch McConnell, all voted down. They are unified. And so this seems to be unifying Republicans against whoever the Democrat candidate is and against Democratic Party. A lot of the comparison about the trifecta stuff, I kind of find it as nonsense. I mean, this is not a criminal proceeding. This is not a court proceeding. This is a political proceeding. And the reality of politics is that the party that's in control of the chamber, whether it's the House or the Senate, makes the rules. And that's how it's always been. That's how it's been in every previous impeachment as well. So when we compare it to a trial where it's kind of not an accurate comparison. Trump had the opportunity. He was invited to come participate in the House proceedings. He turned it down. That may have been, a lot of lawyers thought that was the wrong decision, but it may have been the right decision. He was trying to undercut the legitimacy of that. Now in the Senate, you have very much a partisan Senate that's deciding to create as fast as possible of an acquittal of Trump. It's a preordained conclusion. There's absolutely no way that Trump will be convicted. It's unlikely there'll be even witnesses. They need to get 4 senators to say yes to witness or yes to documents that are not already included in the record from the House. And that looks even that 4 senators looks unlikely. Getting 20 to convict is an impossibility. So we're seeing in both houses a partisan impeachment and a partisan acquittal. This is a political show, and it's designed to impact the 2020 elections. The Democrats hope to wound Trump and undermine his support when it gets to November. And they're also hoping to wound Republican senators so they can get back control of the Senate. The Republicans, on the other hand, are trying to use this to energize and solidify and unify their base. So both parties are using this for political purposes. It's not really equivalent to a criminal proceeding where you have an independent judge, an independent jury, a prosecutor and defense lawyer with powers to present their cases, call witnesses, put in place documents. None of that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a political process.
It also feels like Adam Schiff, it has been celebrated by many people, and people have forgotten that he voted for he was for the war in Iraq. He's supported Hillary Clinton. He has supported regime change in Venezuela, Libya, and because simply he has made it his mission to kind of catch Trump contradicting himself. It seems like he's getting hailed as some sort of like genius. And that really bothers me because it's like, did you guys forget all the things he has done? And, well, let's just watch him a little bit over here at this clip at 1:38, Johnny.
The trial. Last month, President Trump made clear that he supported having senior officials testify before the Senate during his trial, declaring that he would love to have Secretary Pompeo, Mr. Mulvaney, now former Secretary Perry, and, quote, many other people testify in the Senate trial.
So when it's fair, if it were fair in the Senate, I would love to have Mike Pompeo. I'd love to have Mick. I'd love to have Rick Perry and many other people testify.
Okay, so while it's pretty funny to see Trump contradict himself, my question is this going to convince the people that he is guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors? Like, is this anything but a show?
This whole thing is a show. And as far as Schiff goes, he's loved by partisan Democrats, hated by partisan Republicans. And it's just part of the partisanship game. I found really astounding in his comments, in his opening remarks, when he said that the importance of arming Ukraine to fight Russia was so that we can fight them over there, so we don't have to fight them over here.
Yeah.
Wow. Are we at war with Russia? Is he admitting that this is a war in Ukraine on behalf of the United States against Russia? Is that what he's saying? I found that to be really an astounding comment, and so I really the whole that's one of the problems with this impeachment. I don't think the people of the United States really care about a war between Ukraine and Russia, and that Trump was not providing weapons to Ukraine to fight Russia. In fact, I imagine most people in the United States would prefer not to see a war with Russia. And the U.S. involved in that kind of war, even if it's arming and funding it. It's just not something that affects the people of the United States. I mean, there's so many issues that you could have gone after Trump on that would have affected the people of the United States, would have affected the economy, would have affected immigration, healthcare, so many issues. The emoluments, theft, profiting personally, financially from being president. There's so many issues they could have gone after, but to go after the Ukraine war against Russia, it just seems so out of place. And there he is, Schiff, in the first, part of his opening statement, saying we're arming Ukraine to fight Russia, so we don't have to fight them over here. I found that really strange, and to me, it just was off message, and so I don't think that those kind of comments are going to convince the people who are undecided. And you already have partisan Democrats on one side, partisan Republicans on the other side. It's the other voters who are not decided on Trump yet, who they need to reach. I don't see that argument reaching them.
Yeah. I'm going to take this one. I'll let you have this one. All these nefarious actions, Kevin, by the intelligence community. I mean, leaking information to the press, whether it be Peter Strzok, Rod Rosenstein, James Comey. Hasn't this whole scandal really pulled back the curtain on the intelligence community? And shouldn't the American people now be very, very concerned when you see the easy signing of these Pfizer warrants and all this other bullshit that's taking place with these non-elected officials?
Yes, and that started before Trump became president. It started during the election. Comey and how he handled Hillary Clinton during the election was really off mark, and he's been criticized for it by internal reviews. But Trump seems to have declared war on the intelligence community. And Chuck Schumer warned him early in his presidency that's a community that can really hurt you in lots of different ways. And I think we're seeing that now. This whole impeachment began with an anonymous whistleblower from the CIA who reported on this conversation with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and that started the process. So in many ways, this is the intelligence community getting its revenge against Donald Trump, who seems to have picked a war with them.
Yeah. It's extremely hypocritical, but don't you feel like the Democrats have crossed the line here, like the Rubicon, so to speak? It just seems at this point, and plot twist, that they might want Donald Trump to actually win, because if we're looking at the statistics, if we're looking at the data, Bernie Sanders is right now in the lead, not only money wise, but he is rising nationally, also in the early primary states. There are also people like Tulsi Gabbard gaining traction now with her lawsuit against Hillary Clinton as well. It just seems like they'd rather lose to Donald Trump than actually have a progressive win, because that would be more threatening to their status quo. At least Donald Trump would continue this sort of back and forth, football game of that they participate in with left versus right. What are the probabilities of this?
Well, Hillary Clinton I guess it was yesterday, just a few weeks before the Iowa primary, came out with this incredible attack against Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. Where nobody likes him, he never gets anything done. I mean, it's just nonsense, and people in the Senate will tell you a different story about Sanders, but that's what she put out there. And then when she was asked, would you support Sanders if he's the nominee?
Exactly.
She said, I'm not going to go there yet.
Exactly.
She would not commit to it. That's a very interesting sign. Now, if you have a Sanders or a Warren from the progressive part of the Democratic Party, and I put Sanders at a stronger position regarding that than Warren.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you take those two, if they're the nominee, the Democrats have two choices: the FDR choice or the George McGovern choice. The George McGovern choice is abandon the nominee, stab him in the back, get your allies like the unions to do the same, and the end result for McGovern was Nixon came in with a landslide. The other is the FDR model. We're in a crisis. We need to save the country. Let's hold our nose and support FDR. FDR becomes the most popular president probably in history. Mm-hmm. Multiple times, does put in place programs that are still very important today. He's not a perfect president. I'm not here cheerleading him, but he did some very important things during the Depression. So those are the two models. And if one of the nominees who are on the progressive wing get through the DNC roadblocks, and Hillary's kind of indicating the McGovern model for her.
Right.
That's an important wing of the party, and if that wing of the party by itself takes the McGovern approach and stabs Sanders in the back, it's going to be hard for him to win. Now, we don't know what the Obama wing, that's another big wing, is going to do. Now, he's been saying some things that also have been in either through his spokespersons or indirectly. He's been saying some things that are critical of Sanders too, but he hasn't said that he wouldn't support him. So I think that's the big issue that is still down the road. If one of these candidates, especially Sanders, gets through the DNC roadblocks, and there are roadblocks that they have to face, it's not going to be an easy process.
Well, let me push back for a minute. I don't consider Elizabeth Warren as part of the progressive wing at this point, based on her attacks against Bernie Sanders and her sort of positioning towards the Biden camp. So what this situation in particular reminds me of is the FDR Henry Wallace situation, where we have the opportunity to have perhaps a Bernie Sanders, an FDR, with a type of Henry Wallace that was also a very a socialist type of candidate, very forward thinking in the civil rights movement, who was pretty much ousted by the Democratic establishment.
Right.
And then, of course, replaced by Truman, who led this country into what we know as the Cold War. Subsequently, everything pretty much as history came about. So it's just that's kind of what I see happening here. I see them trying to kind of replace Sanders or have the establishment have a hold on Sanders in one way or another. And I think if they can't beat him, they're going to do whatever they can to have some sort of hold within his administration. And that it's funny because Warren just pretty much shot herself in the foot by her actions, because they were considering her for VP. And then, after all of this, that's pretty much off the table. So it's really interesting to see, the mechanisms behind the DNC and how the Sanders campaign is handling that. So
I think Warren has shown a lot of bad political judgment. I mean, now she's trying to do something I think is not easy to do, which unlike Sanders, she's trying to thread the needle and get the Clinton, Obama corporate wing of the party to support her, as well as the Sanders wing.
Right.
And she has been trying to do that now. In the last month or so, she's made a series of mistakes, starting Medicare for All. She totally blew Medicare for All. She showed herself not to be a solid supporter of improved Medicare for All when she put forward a two-step process where she'll support the ACA, put in place a public option, which is counterproductive, and then in her third year, she'll go for Medicare for All. We know the history of presidential politics. In that second year is really a major backlash politically against the new president. And as a result, you'll see the Senate and House move more to the Republican direction, unless history does not repeat itself. So I think that's a mistake. And then, of course, this most recent mistake with the anonymous attack on Sanders, saying that a woman couldn't win, which was totally inconsistent with Sanders' record.
Right.
And then Sanders coming out and saying, I didn't say that. And then Warren coming out and said, you did say that. Then the conflict of that at the last debate, and that moment when Warren refused to shake Sanders' hand.
Yeah.
What a mistake. So and these mistakes have really hurt Warren. She's
Absolutely.
been dropping consistently in the polls since these mistakes started to happen. And people are just, I think one of the most important things for a candidate is people have to trust the person. They have to believe the person is sincere in what they're saying. I think Warren has shown herself not to be sincere, at least has raised that question for people. So I think she's diminishing. And I think one reason why Sanders polls are going up is because former Warren supporters are moving toward him. And I think former Biden supporters are also moving toward him. Sanders is the second choice of many Biden supporters, which is, I think, a name recognition issue more than anything else. But it is the reality. So I think Warren's made some terrible errors. She, from the beginning, she says, capitalist to my bones. I mean, so she already has shown herself to be on the corporate wing more than I think the Sanders wing would like. So she's, if anything, she's a secretary of treasurer in the Sanders administration, where she can focus on her strength. I'm not sure who the vice president would be. He says it'll be a woman. I don't think Tulsi, unfortunately, is quite at that level. I think she's doing a great job raising some issues. I love her language about regime change wars. I think that's a very accurate way of describing many of the wars that the U.S. is involved in and that the U.S. is threatening. So I think she's done a lot of good stuff, but I'm not sure she's vice presidential level. I'm not sure who the right choice. It might be very interesting not to pick a politician, but to pick somebody who's a civil rights writer or a mandatory sentencing writer or a union leader, or, there's lots of different choices you can go beyond. Don't get stuck in the box. It has to be a member of Congress, governor, or senator. It could be a non-politician, which would be very interesting.
Kevin, did you just call me a liar on national television?
Yeah, it was such a mistake. Oh my God.
I mean, with the microphones on, how bad was that? And also just to kind of bounce off what you're saying, I'm still of the point, I know people think it's just because I'm a Tulsi crowd or whatever, that Bernie Sanders needs a person like Tulsi to win, because all my Republican friends call me from the Northeast going, I like this Tulsi person. I like this, that she is the only one that they like on that Democratic stage, even when she does get on the stage. And I do think she still peels off a lot of libertarians, and that's big. And if you can actually poach from Donald Trump and bring them over here, that's going to get you over the top. But we'll wait and see how this all plays out.
Well, I think the most important thing for the vice presidential choice for Sanders, I'd say two things. One, the whole goal of a Sanders campaign, if he gets through the nomination, is energize the base. Get more, as he says it, more voters out than ever before.
The base? His base is energized. Sanders people are going to show up.
Beyond. It's not just his base. It's getting his base is energized for sure.
Yes.
You want to get the working class people of the United States energized for a candidate who, they thought many working class people thought Trump was going to help them, and now he's pushed this NAFTA deal. By the way, that's something that Warren made the mistake of supporting as well. And so I think he needs someone who can energize non-voters. Let me put it that way, because his base, you're right, will be energized. And they get non-voters to come out and support him. And the second thing he needs from a vice president is someone who's going to stand up in a bulldog kind of way, because he is going to be attacked incredibly. And so he needs someone who's really a strong fighter back for him.
Yeah.
Well,
let's be honest. I mean, Tulsi's defended him, been the only one. I mean, some of his surrogates didn't even defend him.
Yeah.
When the attacks came from Warren. So
that's right. She left the DNC in the last election to support.
Yeah, I mean, I see her as a bulldog. Honestly, that's one of the main reasons I agree with Pasta here. I think she would poach a lot of votes from independents, right, and also people who are anti-establishment, because she may not be a democratic socialist to my liking in that way. But I do think she has an anti-establishment zeal to her. And I think people were off put by her for a minute, but I think since in the last recent events where she's defended Sanders, I've seen a lot more Bernie supporters who were previously critical of her kind of start to be like, oh, we really like her. Oh, she's like an attack dog. Da 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 da. So
especially as Warren has diminished.
Exactly. As her credibility has shot. Yeah.
Just to be clear for listeners, I am not a Democrat. I'm supporting Howie Hawkins, who's running for the Green Party nomination.
With the Russiagate stuff?
He's much better than Sanders on every issue, and he's much on Russiagate. He's very clear. It's a distraction. It's a falsehood. He got trapped by a little blogger, but that was out of context. If you go to his website, howiehawkins.us, you can read his Russiagate statements. They're very clear. I'm sure you'd agree with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that Elizabeth Warren would even if she was around, that she would ever even add to Bernie's vote count, because she's even said stuff like she won't go on Fox and whatnot. I've said from the get-go, and Fiorella has put out a lot of where her money's come from and whatnot. I think she's a cancer for the Democratic ticket. Once again, she doesn't reach across the aisle, and that's a big, big issue. So I think we have to look at people's political ideologies and grab them that way, and that's why I think that Sanders Tulsi ticket is just really, really good. But let's just finish up on some of this stuff. Why did Nancy Pelosi? Well, three more questions about the impeachment. We'll get you out of here. Why did Nancy Pelosi hold on to the articles of impeachment to begin with at the end? I couldn't understand why she was doing this. I thought she was going to hold on to them and never send them over, but she did send them over. Why wait?
Yeah. I don't. The way it played out made no sense. I mean, when she started to hold on to it, I was hopeful that she was actually going to do something smart. But then she gave it up when they came back from recess. It made no sense. I mean, she had the perfect opportunity to hold on to that impeachment and gather more evidence when John Bolton said he would testify before the Senate. That, to me, should have led to a subpoena from the House. That should have led to Pelosi saying, we're not going to send this to the Senate until we have Mulvaney and Bolton testify in the House to add to this. Now that Bolton said he's willing to testify, he needs to testify in the House before this gets sent to the Senate. And so I would even say withdraw the impeachment until we get more information. And then you would have 2 months of fights about this and finally get Bolton testifying, finally get Mulvaney testifying. You're into March. And then you have another whole impeachment papers written up with this new evidence. You have another vote. You vote him twice on impeachment with more evidence. Then you get into the Senate April, May. That is much more impactful for the 2020 election. So I think she was on the right path when she held it back, but some reason she chickened out and didn't use that to its advantage. Now we're going to this charade, partisan Senate trial, which is going to result in no witnesses, no documents, no new evidence, and both sides arguing, some written questions from the senators, closing arguments, and it's over before the February 4th when Trump comes to the Congress to make his State of the Union presentation. And so it's going to be a very quick.
Thank God. The sooner the better, Kevin. Sorry, I know. I mean, strategics, but
I agree with that.
Please.
So ultimately, though, doesn't impeachment polarize the nation further, and doesn't it kind of create a precedent for perhaps the next Democratic president to be impeached on such frivolous grounds? Because obviously, like we can all agree, Donald Trump could have been impeached on a multitude of other things, but the way he was impeached this time kind of allows, if the Republicans came back, let's say Bernie Sanders is president in 2020, I mean, they could just throw that at him, and of course we could go through the same process. I mean, it just seems like it's kind of a dangerous thing to tread on right now.
Well, I think that it does create some real issues in what impeachment really should be about. I mean, I think that I do think these are legitimate charges.
Right.
I do think the fact that Trump, and he clearly did, wanted Zelensky to announce an investigation of the Bidens is certainly to help his political campaign. He's using his power in office, his unique power in office, to withhold meetings, troops, financial aid in order to get political help in his reelection campaign. I think that is impeachable, but there were other things to impeach him for. So it's a bad precedent to set. I don't like the idea of an impeachment in election year. When it'd be so much better to focus on the issues and remove Trump, who's the worst president of my lifetime. To have him removed from office would be a great thing. I hope he's replaced by someone in the progressive side of the party and someone that the movement, the political, which I focus most of my time on at popularresistance.org, is building a transformational movement. And I think we need to be prepared, if it's Sanders or whoever, that movement needs to push him or her to transform the country on so many fronts. We are in crisis situations on climate change, on housing, on healthcare, on foreign policy and never-ending wars, military spending, so many crisis situations that we need the movement to grow and push whoever's becomes president to do the right thing.
Yeah. Well, I disagree with you on Trump. W was the worst president in our lifetime. W was
sure.
just, oh my God.
Some could argue Reagan. I mean, they're all terrible.
Yeah, but the Wolfowitz doctrine and everything that Bush did, I mean, Junior W was just, I mean, I don't know. He was awful. But
Clinton is the one that said that the Middle East is our national security issue, and we'll do everything we have to protect our access to the oil. So that's Carter. Carter, who some people say is the best president of our time.
Right.
Yeah.
He's the one who put that doctrine, the Carter doctrine.
He did.
Yeah.
Which led to these Middle East wars. So they're all terrible in ways. But I find almost every day waking up to something Trump does or says, it just angers me.
Yeah.
And I find him to be pretty despicable personality.
I think he's despicable. Yeah. I would use that word. He's disliked. He's just so dislikable.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's foreign policy wise the worst one technically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's trying to catch up to Obama's his jailing of whistleblowers. He's going to try to catch up on that stat over there. Because remember, Obama, I think it was like 8 whistleblowers. You know what I'm saying? He was also the deporter-in-chief, and Trump seems like he's trying to catch him there as well. But like we said, they're all awful. And, especially when it comes to the Ukraine, I talk about, with Johnny and Fee, how much I was watching and paying attention to popularresistance.org.
That was so interesting.
Yeah.
March
Svoboda. It was like a televised coup. And that's why I get so upset with this impeachment process here in the Ukraine. And Johnny and I were talking yesterday. He's going to finish up with the last question today, and it's a great question. So here's Johnny Sue.
The great question.
There you go.
Okay, so, I was wondering, when this whole impeachment trial started, what was it exactly that they were impeaching him on? It was over the phone call of him withholding the Ukrainian aid, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, what is the aid made of? That's what I was wondering, and the question really is are the warmongering Dems angry with Trump because he withheld the aid package because it is in their interest for the aid to go through. Because right now on the screen, I'm showing this article from Defense News. It says, in June, the Pentagon announced plans to provide $250 million to Ukraine in security cooperation funds for additional training, equipment, and advisory efforts to build the capacity of Ukraine's armed forces. So it's a bunch of military equipment.
That's
and,
right.
You know, things like that. So.
No, I think that's one thing that's really been interesting in the Trump era. You know, when Trump talked about getting out of Syria, the Democrats, along with Lindsey Graham and the neocons, went crazy. Oh, we can't leave Syria. Oh my God, we can't leave Syria. You know, same with Afghanistan. You know, on any time Trump would try to withdraw from somewhere, the Democrats would go crazy. And the fact that they impeached on this military aid to Ukraine being denied or slowed, it ended up getting approved, being slowed, is really telling. And the fact that Schiff, in his opening comments in the beginning of his presentation today, talked about fighting Russia over there. Mm-hmm. It just really indicates that it's a very strange issue. It's obviously an issue that moves enough elected Democrats. This war-mongering with Russia in Ukraine issue, and it certainly had a negative reaction among some of the neocons. So it was potentially a divisive issue, I guess they saw. But among voters, I don't think that it really flies. And so I think the Democrats showing themselves to be warmongers. They voted for the NDAA military budget. Mm-hmm. At the time they impeached the president. They voted for the new NAFTA. At the same time they impeached the president, showing them that they're corporate foreign policy Democrats, putting in place corporate trade. So on these issues of corporate trade and U.S. imperialism, the Democrats, at the same time they're impeaching him, were supporting Trump. And they've been totally silent on regime change in Venezuela, an issue I've worked a lot on and facing federal charges on. You know, they've been totally silent on that issue. And some of the leading Democrats, including Bernie Sanders, said some pretty dumb things about President Maduro and the reality of the political system in Venezuela. So the Democrats are showing themselves to be terrible on these issues. And under Trump, they have, you know, when he puts forward a budget, they increase the budget for the military on top of what Trump offers. So this impeachment proceeding highlights the fact that the Democrats are a war party, a second wing of the war party that we have in the United States.
Yeah, it's shocking, you know, and it kind of worries me for future impeachments. Like if a Bernie Sanders or a Tulsi Gabbard gets in, or a Howie Hawkins gets into office, and they try to do the same thing, withhold aid, because we don't want to send, you know, if they want to dismantle the military-industrial complex, you know, they'll probably both Republican and Dems will try to impeach that president.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I don't expect Howie Hawkins to get in office, by the way. I'm not politically foolish that way, but I do think he can have an impact on the direction of the country. The history of third parties in the United States, except for one exception, the history of third parties in the United States is not to get elected, but to change the direction of the country by their political campaigns, being in solidarity with political movements. Yeah. That's the history of the country. And that's how we got the union power. That's how we got the 8-hour workday. That's how we got women's voting rights. That's how we got the New Deal. These were all issues that were put in place by third-party candidates that didn't win. The one third-party candidate that did win, and it took decades of third-party losses, and that was over abolition of slavery. And the most successful third-party president in history, Abraham Lincoln, was elected with less than 40% of the vote in a four-way race. The first time a Republican was ever elected president, that was the third party in those days. The Whigs and Democrats were the two parties. They were both pro-slavery. And so that's the role of third parties. And so Howie Hawkins and HowieHawkins.us, his goal is to put on the agenda issues like a eco-socialist Green New Deal, which includes a key part of it is moving to a peace economy, cutting the military budget by 75%. To a real defensive military, not an offensive military. The military is the greatest fossil fuel polluter in the nation. And if we can't have a confrontation with climate chaos, a Green New Deal, without facing up to the military budget and the military reality. So he's trying to put that issue into the narrative. He already was the first candidate to ever run on a Green New Deal back in 2010. He ran for governor of New York, so he's already affecting the narrative. But he wants to really move this issue into the sphere. And so if people really want to see a solution to climate change, Hawkins is the only candidate who has a real solution. Sanders is the best of the Democrats on climate change as well. He's the best, but his positions are not consistent with the science demands. The only candidate who is Hawkins, and he lays it out very clearly, including a budget, including the workers' rights under a Green New Deal, a Bill of Rights for workers, including transforming multiple sectors of our economy, from agriculture to energy, to housing, to construction, to transit, banking. All this needs to transition if we're going to put in place the kind of policies we need to deal with the climate crisis. And Hawkins is the only candidate who puts that in. He's not going to win the election, but he could influence the direction of the country. And if my favorite result will be a Sanders victory and Hawkins doing better than previous third parties have done and getting his eco-socialist Green New Deal into the political narrative. Then when Sanders gets in, we can all really push for a peace economy and a Green New Deal. Yes. That is, I hope, comes out of 2020.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be interesting seeing that Howie Hawkins is this year's Jill Stein for the Green Party, I guess. And I don't think Gary Johnson's throwing his hat back into the ring. I believe a candidate by the name of Soraya Foss is over there for the Libertarian Party. So it's going to be interesting to see how these candidates, these third-party candidates, how they kind of factor into play, because they did get a decent amount of votes last time out. Gary Johnson, I believe, got over 5%. Jill Stein got close to 2%. That's 7% of the votes. But as the vote increases, their numbers should increase as well.
And the key is that a movement grows with it.
Yes.
Yeah. And Sanders claims that he's running a campaign, not a movement. There is a political movement, and we report on it on popularresistance.org every day. It's growing dramatically. I mean, when we were involved in Occupy, and Popular Resistance came out of Occupy, but when we were involved in Occupy, about 0.1%, that's 0.1% of people were involved in Occupy. And look how it shook the establishment. The FBI was meeting with police every week by telephone. How do we deal with Occupy? What do we deal with? They infiltrated, they attacked. Now we look at the movements today, we're at about 1%. So about 10 times as many people are active in political movements now than they were during Occupy. Bernie Sanders would not have been possible without Occupy.
Yeah.
And the purpose of a Hawkins campaign, is to amplify the movement in the electoral system. We know it's a mirage democracy. We know elections are manipulated. We know debates are only for two parties. We know the media is against us. But the key is getting new ideas out into the political narrative and showing some political support, enough support to scare both parties that will affect the outcome of the election.
You want to ask about Hassan? Do you want me to?
No, go ahead.
So to get you out of here, I got one question. Since we are independent media, you've been doing this for a little bit longer than us. We've been doing it for a short amount of time, but I think we all face the same hurdles of what's going on. I'm a civil liberties guy, you know me, and Julian Assange right now is getting ready for an extradition hearing to maybe possibly be shipped over here to the United States. What are your feelings about the Julian Assange situation right now? And also maybe you can talk a little bit about Chelsea Manning as well. And if you want to sprinkle in a little Edwin Snowden, because this is a serious issue that a lot of the mainstream candidates are not touching.
Oh, it's very true. And, Julian Assange, I've been a supporter of Assange's work as a publisher and editor of WikiLeaks from the beginning. WikiLeaks has published some of the most important news stories of this century. If you had to pick one outlet that has put out the most important stories, it would be Assange's WikiLeaks. And Chelsea Manning has been a key person in that. She released the incredible documents from involving the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, the State Department cables, corporate intrusion into foreign policy around the world. And she's been incarcerated now, refusing to testify in these secret grand juries. And I think that they made Assange Manning maybe the most important First Amendment stories of the year. And how Julian Assange is treated will define freedom of speech and freedom of the press for this century. This is the John Peter Zenger case of our times. John Peter Zenger was prosecuted in colonial era for writing negative commentary, but truthful commentary about a British governor. He was prosecuted and found not guilty, and that is really where freedom of press was born in our Constitution. I think Assange really will define freedom of press for this century. I think Chelsea Manning is raising incredibly important questions about the grand jury system, which initially was set up to protect people from false accusations by having a secret grand jury investigate before it goes public, but has turned into a prosecutor's tool to indict people in a secret process where only one side is heard by the jury. The grand jury only hears from the prosecutor. The lawyer for the person being investigated is not presenting anything. In fact, the lawyer is not even in the room in front of the grand jury. If someone's a witness in a grand jury, they have to leave the room to go talk to the lawyer. And so the grand jury process has been destroyed and become a tool of prosecutors and needs to be totally revisited. I think Chelsea Manning is raising a very important issue regarding criminal injustice in the United States.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to close out. I'm going to tell you about you got to tell us about the work you are doing too. But I just want to close on the fact that, Fiorella always talks about the way we can move Bernie Sanders. I think about the way Mike Gravel was with was it Ellsberg? Daniel Ellsberg?
Yes.
Yeah, Vietnam, you know what I'm saying? And he was
That's
so
right.
influential. And I really hope that eventually Bernie Sanders makes that push and we get Assange freed, you know what I'm saying? Because what he did was really important. That's something I'm hoping for, and thank you for your opinions on that. Why don't you tell us about the work you're doing, how you're going around and around the states and what you're doing, where we can find you?
Sure. Thanks a lot for asking that. And by the way, with Assange and the extradition, this extradition hearing is a first step. It sounds like it's a very manipulated hearing. It's not. He's not getting a fair justice. He's not meeting with his lawyer. He's not able to review documents with his lawyer. He's not really able to prepare. But this will be appealed and appealed. This will be a multi-year process. It's a very important next step. I'm not underestimating the importance of it, but it's only a first step. As far as what we're working on popularresistance.org, we cover about 15 fronts of struggle, everything involving economic, racial, and environmental justice, as well as peace and U.S. imperialism. We're very focused right now on our defense. We are facing federal criminal charges for our work to defend the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. We were in the embassy last April and May for 37 days to prevent the coup mongers taking over the building. And we are now facing federal prosecution for that. There's a website, defendembassyprotectors.org. that is set up by a defense committee. It's independent of us, but it has a lot of information, a frequently asked question page, updates on what's going on in our trial, as well as how you can donate to our defense. I just returned from Florida. Margaret Flowers and I just did two presentations in Florida. We were in California earlier this year, in Illinois. We're heading to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts to raise consciousness about what's going on in Venezuela, where we're told so many lies in the media and by bipartisan politicians in Congress. And so we try to get the truth out about what's going on in Venezuela, the truth about the failed coup, as well as about the charges we're facing. The government has put forward a motion that would prevent us from telling the jury that Maduro is president, that Guaido is not president, that we were in the embassy with the permission of the elected government of Venezuela, that there was a coup mob outside surrounding the building, aided by the U.S. government, blocking our food, turning off our electricity, turning off our water, breaking in the building, damaging the building. We were defending the embassy.
Yeah.
And according to the motion filed by the Trump prosecutors, they don't want the jury to be told any of that. They want the jury to be in the dark and convict us without full information. We have a hearing on January 29th, and the judge will rule on that motion and will determine whether we have a fair trial or a jury with blinders on. Justice will really be blind in this case if this Trump prosecutor's motion succeeds.
You know, we made this little quick video Johnny made. He wants to show you. Go ahead. The Guaido supporters using racist and homophobic slurs. You want to?
Right.
We don't have to show that, but you can go there. And we just saw what really took place out there and what went on, and it kind of led to the whole Max Blumenthal situation. But let me say this much. If you're going out and about and you're stuck again without food, I'm going to bring you some bolognese, okay?
I love bolognese.
Yeah, I told you that. Well, we got anything else?
No.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next month.
All right. Thanks a lot. Keep up the great work.
You too. Good luck out
Alrighty.
there.
For Pasta
Thanks a lot.
Jardula,
And Fiorella.
Johnny Sue on the 1s and 2s with Kevin Zeese. Not stuck in the embassy this time.
Combo out.
See you in a little bit, guys.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.